And this is the point in the show that I enjoy the most, when I introduce our guest analysts who are here to give us their perspective on nearly everything we've covered in the program and beyond. And today I'm joined here in the studio by the journalist, policy strategist and Arise News analyst Waziri Adio, and by the public affairs commentator, head of communications at Bayes University, and of course Arise News analyst Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Let me come to you, Waziri, first. You heard the very strong, unapologetic comments from the famous activist Aisha Yusufu, strident in her support for Peter Obi. What's your assessment of what she said?
Well, she spoke very well, as usual, and she wasn't apologetic about her support for Peter Obi. And she also made the distinction between being a supporter of a person and not being a card-carrying member. A card-carrying member of a political party. You know, she said many things about the level of support for Peter Obi, about you know, not just the youth, but even Nigerians who are dissatisfied with bad governance, and also some silent supporters. You know, obviously she's a partisan. You know, and I admire her support. She has a right to it. What this election is going to show us is that there are many assumptions that are going to be tested. The old way of doing politics with that hold up, the new awakening with that override the old way of doing politics. Whichever side you speak to, they will tell you that they are going to triumph, and that's what makes it.
The bottom line is waiting.
We have the election is in February. We have a long campaign period. What people did after the primaries, even up to now, the campaign is just barely a week. We're going to have a campaign period of 20 weeks, so there's still a lot to see. So
that's actually a good point, and I'm going to come back to that when we talk about Bola Tinubu. But Professor Adeniyi, should she perhaps be concerned that Peter Obi may find himself drawing parallels with other people in the world who've become very popular but are unable to transfer that respect people have for them into the political field? In other words, Peter Obi's case, he may end up as the conscience of the nation rather than its leader.
Well, I don't see Peter Obi as a rock star. Neither do I see him as a Hollywood or Lollywood star. I see him as a politician. Yes, a celebrity, that, but it's a politician of consequence, with strong character, who has demonstrated his traits as somebody who is concerned for prudence, somebody who wants to disrupt the political character of this country, to move away from the politics of prerogative, politics of patronage and compensation, to politics of productivity and efficiency. That's how I see him, So his narrative is completely different from what we've been seeing in the past. And that's the message is pushing through, and that's what's resonating with a large portion of the Nigerian demographics. And that's what Aisha Yusufu, a lady with a steel heart, passionate about political process, about bringing about change in this country. That's what I see her also joining Peter Obi in pushing forward. And of course, you could see that she has also emphasized that identity we've created for Peter Obi as somebody who would have created the same result if he had moved to another party apart from Labour Party. If Peter Obi had gone to maybe Action or any of the other group, I mean, there would still have been the same followership, the same frenzy that is generating now, will still have followed him. And of course, we can see the result in what Aisha is saying, that I'm not concerned about Peter Obi's party, but I'm concerned about his person. So I do not see Peter Obi as somebody who is popular and whose popularity will just fizzle out, that will not be replicated in the outcome of the kind of support he's going to get at the end, during the election. I see it reflecting one way or the other. I don't know if he's going to win, but I see him making a very strong impact, when voting is counted at the end of the day.
That's an interesting analysis. Let's move away from Peter Obi and Aisha Yusufu and talk about something that immediately concerns the country, which is President Buhari's budget. 20.5 trillion naira proposed for 2023, a recurrent expenditure profile of 8.27 trillion naira, a capital expenditure profile of 5.3 trillion naira. So once again, recurrent exceeding capital.
Oh, it's not just recurrent exceeding capital, and this is something that also speaks to issues that that have dominated the political economy of the country for some time now. Out of a budget of a proposed budget, because it's not yet even deliberated on, not to talk of being passed, and all of that. But a proposed budget of 20.5 trillion, right? Debt service alone is 6.3 trillion.
That's frightening.
That's 30%.
Yeah, that is frightening.
That's 30%. The entire revenue, expected is 11.09 trillion, and which is 54%, which means the deficit of that budget is 46%.
Absolutely.
And don't forget that that is projected revenue. In most instances,
it never quite gets there.
So you are not going to get up to that. You have debt service. If you look at the breakdown, is actually higher than capital. Right.
But if you have, given that you have a budget that's loaded with borrowing and deficits, as you pointed out, what implications does that have for the macroeconomic environment in Nigeria?
Well, what it means is that if you have a budget that has 30% just to service debt, right? It means for you to be able to implement that budget, you need to borrow. And what it also means is that you continue to borrow, right? So it creates, a vicious cycle. The more you borrow, the more your debt obligations will be. The less the money you have to do some other things. So the point I'm trying to make is that there's this first debate that we've been having in this country. Do we have a debt problem, or do we have a revenue problem, or do we have a spending problem? We don't. This is false bifurcation, right? We have all problems. We have a revenue problem, right? We're not generating enough. Even the 20 trillion budget, right? If you compare it to the budget of Egypt or the budget of South Africa, right? And you break it down by capita, it's still a small sum. So we're not even budgeting enough for our need and our size, and we don't have enough revenue to do that. Right. So you have a revenue problem, you have a debt problem, right? And you have a spending problem, because sometimes we're also spending on things that shouldn't be the priority. Look at even the budget. The president said, which is also very commendable, that petroleum subsidy is not sustainable, right? If they're going to do, I think in the budget they are doing only half year, right, which is about 3-point-something trillion, but you are spending capital 5 trillion, and you're going to be spending 3-point-something trillion on just one item, which is fuel subsidy, which doesn't go to the poor. It actually goes to the rich, right? So we have a spending problem in what we prioritize,
right?
And we need to face up to the problem and stop, deceiving ourselves. We can borrow ourselves. We can borrow our way out of this problem.
Let me bring in Professor Abiodun, because he said that this budget has been prepared amidst a very challenging world economy, which is true. But do we worsen things, just like Waziri Adio was saying, by what we fail to control, such as our spending, our budgeting, oil theft, and all the rest of it?
Absolutely. Things are worse, not just by what we fail to control, but some of the things that have been like the big elephant in the room over the years, and that we have been tepid about dealing with them. And what are those things? Waste, leakages, one, oil theft. Then what about the systemic corruption, the absence of transparency and credibility and integrity in public expenditure process? These are things that are still subsisting. Now we're going to borrow. Arguments have been made in the past that the question is not about borrowing, that it is what we do with the sums. Of course, we know in the world that some of the richest nations in the world are equally the most prosperous. United States comes to mind, Japan comes to mind. But in our own case, what have we been doing with those funds that we've been borrowing? Oftentimes, if you do proper forensic analysis, analysis, forensic checks, you discover that those monies again have been wasted through leakages, through corruption, self-aggrandizement. And the unfortunate thing about it is that when those monies are pilfered, they are not brought back into the economy such that the economy could be reflated. So oftentimes we have a cycle of, a cyclical corruption such that growth is stifled, development is absent, as the case could be. And what do you have as a result? Underdevelopment. And we have these assumption that we're making progress through the routine process of budgeting. It's not the budget is not, it's everything, all the indices, all the projections are actually predictable. We knew it was going to be heavy on deficits, heavy on borrowing, and heavy in the sense that capital expenditure was going to get less. And of course, in an economy when you are spending less on capital and spending more on recurrent, what do you expect? Of course,
very difficult to have growth.
You cannot have growth.
Yeah.
But what do we do in this circumstance? It's not all gloom yet. The president sounded philosophical, sounded ideological, being a transition budget as the case could be. But we expect the next administration to find ways of boosting confidence in the system, because economic is about confidence boosting.
Absolutely.
Creating a greater level of security so that we can have greater level of capital inflow, monies or funds, resources that could reflate the economy so that consumption can be boosted, the GDP can grow a little higher, and of course the multipliers again can be bettered as the case could be.
Okay, very good points. Let's move away from the budget and turn to the APC. Festus Keyamo, the Presidential Campaign Council spokesman for the APC, has been talking up his candidate and the APC, expectedly. Bola Tinubu back now from his sojourn abroad and seemingly in good spirits. What do you reckon?
Well, I think it's good that he came back because I don't think that was well managed. They tried to do some damage control with release of some pictures, of some videos, which also generated some controversies, and all of that. And the speculation about what is going on with him, But now that he's back, people can see him. So I think it's time for them to get on with it.
And talking about getting on with it, Prof. The APC campaign has not been officially launched, and their manifesto has not been released, unveiled. But the length of time ahead of the campaign, given that length of time, are they wise to be taking their time?
Well, I've listened to some of the arguments as canvassed by many of their spokespersons, that they do not want to burn out, very quickly if they were to start their campaign early, and of course they are a big machine. It takes time. They are a big masquerade in some other cases, like they have said. It takes time, for instance, to start a big machine, and of course that the big masquerade dance lasts, as the case could be. These are interesting arguments, but again, we're in a period of kind of anxiety. We want to see more engagement on the part of the political parties. The APC as a big party for one. I mean, people are much more interested in the big parties, rightly or wrongly. So the APC is one of the leaders in this regard. So we want to hear them engage, not through the instrumentality of the spokespersons, but the principals themselves.
Absolutely.
They need to be much more engaging, And the argument, the speculation around APC presidential flag bearer, it's more rife, because, he's engaging less. Nobody has doubt about his intellect, about his pedigree, maybe as an outstanding leader, for instance, as a good headhunter. We do not have doubts around that, but of course, we want to see him practicalize it in form by being much more forthcoming than he is. That's what I think. We saw diffuse the controversies around his health. Because all these things create more suspicion.
Right.
I mean, if you look at these things, the psychology of communication tells us that the more you want to hide something, the more people will become curious about it.
Well, there's a professor of communication. So let's not. We have to listen to that.
So
but we've got a couple of.
But
you are a professor of communications. Let's face it. I mean, before we go, Waziri, we've seen some hints dropped in the media about their manifesto, the APC. Assuming, of course, that those hints are correct, it looks like he'll be tilting towards helping the poor directly, and this is coming directly from Festus Keyamo, so not like the leaked document, rather than waiting for a trickle down. Also, lots of attention apparently given to infrastructure, then of course agriculture. So in some ways, a continuation of what the Buhari government has been doing.
Well, you know, if you look at the two major parties, APC and PDP, you can say that PDP is center-right and APC is center-left, right? So it's not
basically
surprising.
it's the SDP and the NRC all over again.
Yeah, basically. What I want to see this time around is not just those hints. It's not just those proclamations, right? You want to help the poor. What exactly is your plan?
And where are you going to get the money?
How are you going to do it? And where are you going to get the money? How much will it cost? And where are you going to get the money? Right. So this is a time I think we need to do a different kind of campaign. And the fact that we have time, so we're not rushing. We have time. So we have time to listen to them when they are ready. Whenever they are ready, I think we should put their feet to the fire and grill all of them. So it's not just about, oh, we trust this person. No, it's not about trust. We should, yes, there is a place for trust, there's a place for antecedent and all of that. But what do you have to say? What is your plan about the major challenges facing this country today?
Well, you know, most of us we don't like to think, but you've got a think tank, so we'll let your think tank do the crunching
but beyond the
and then
think
come
tank,
to us, and we'll just sit down and listen to you.
I think you know, politicians, if we allow them to play to their comfort, right, to play in their comfort zone, right, they will get away with it.
I absolutely agree.
So we need this time around, you know, the media, we need to question them, interrogate them, and look at their plans, and you know, and see whether it makes sense. But the citizens also need to do that. We don't need to, when you spoke to Aisha, you know, Yusufu, you mentioned this thing about this savior mentality. We have done that many times, and we know where it led us as a country. We need to get people. It's not just, oh, we believe this person, we trust this person. What do you have to offer?
Absolutely.
And let's listen to them, and let's ask them questions. Most of them want to run away from difficult things because those difficult things are not vote winners, right? And that's the nature of politics. That's the nature of politicians. They will just want to tell you, we're going to create jobs, we're going to increase revenue, we're going to fight corruption, we're going to tackle insecurity and all of those things. But the real stuff is in the details.
Yeah.
What do you plan to do? How? What exactly? And does it make sense?
That's a very good point. And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed, Waziri Adio, and of course, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you very much indeed, and have a lovely weekend. That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.